Hello everyone, AmyR here with Prairie Paper and Ink, and super behind as usual. This is my card for this week's Color Throwdown Challenge, and there's still time to play along with this one before a new one is announced next week. So I am starting off with some Canson XL watercolor paper, and I'm using the new Simon Says Stamp So Cool stamp set. And I've just got one of the popsicle images with the little stick, which are separate stamps. I just have them butted up against each other on my acrylic block here. And I'm stamping them onto this watercolor paper. And I'd use my anti-static powder tool first, and then I'm stamping the images with Simon Says clear embossing ink. And as I'm going along, I'm adding the white embossing powder just so I can see where it is, because when I stamp with the clear ink, I can't see it at all. So I did all that and then used my heat tool to melt all this embossing powder all at the same time. So I've got all these little heat embossed popsicles all over this watercolor paper. So I wanted to kind of create the background slash focal point of my card here. So once I got everything melted, I decided to use my Crayola fine line markers to do my watercoloring. I'd got this set in the, I think it was the May card kit from Simon Says. I've done a couple of videos and I'll have them linked at the end using these markers. And I remember saying when I first tried them, I was actually really surprised at how well they moved with water. So I had them sitting out and I was like, you know, I should just use these to make my card. Like, why not? So that's what I did. I just am scribbling on the color with the marker and then pulling it out with a water brush. And during the process, I decided I wanted to be a little messy with it. I do really like heat embossing in the watercoloring because I always say the heat embossing kind of keeps everything more contained. You don't have to worry about color bleeding out. It's just, it makes things more convenient. Plus I like it with heat embossed in white because, you know, it makes the white pop when you add the color. But this time I went against that and purposely created more of a messy look, because in my head I was kind of thinking like how these would look if they actually were like laying it on a surface and melting. So it just made for also really quick and easy coloring, because then I didn't have to be as careful. I purposely just went over the lines and had fun with it. So I did yellow first, and then I'm doing my red, and then I'm going to do my blue. That is this color challenge, and I did struggle a bit. I didn't know what I was going to create with these colors. It just, you know, wasn't working for me this time. But then as I started thinking about this card and these images, I was like, oh, this'll work. So I just did, well, you know, one color at a time because it's more convenient. So got my yellow down, got my red down, got my blue down. And as I was letting the color, you know, kind of bleed out and like pulling it out with my water brush, I made sure not to let the color mix with the one next to it, because then it would have created, you know, the blue and yellow would have created green, the blue and the red would create purple, which would be fine. But again, I wanted to kind of stick to this color combo for the challenge. So once I was done all the main areas of coloring, I quickly colored in all of the little sticks with one of the brown markers, and same thing, just scrolled down a little bit, pulled it out with my water brush, and it was good to go. I made sure it was completely dry before I pulled out my splatter cubby and my Copic opaque white, which is really dried on the top, but I gave it a good stir with just the end of my paintbrush. So that helped a ton rather than me constantly having to dig into it every time I want to use it. I've had this for so long now, but yeah, gave it a good stir and then just kind of put some of the excess onto an acrylic block. And then I watered it down a little bit just so it's more like liquidy. And then I'm just gonna flick the edge of my paintbrush against the acrylic block and create a fun little white splatter. And that just gives it a little extra something. So this time making sure to do it in my splatter cubby rather than just on the surface of my desk, where I end up with like white splatter everywhere. And especially the Copic opaque white. That one is a little bit harder to clean up because it's so pigmented. It just gets all over everything. So again, set that aside to dry, and I'm going to work on my sentiment. The sentiment comes in that same So Cool stamp set. So I've just got a scrap of black cardstock here that I use the anti-static powder tool on again, and then I'm just stamping the sentiment with the clear embossing ink, and then I'm coating it with the same Hero Arts white embossing powder. And I gotta say, I think I've said this before, I'm really impressed with this embossing powder. It's not labeled as a detail embossing powder, and yet it still shows a lot of detail. I thought for a second when I first coated this with the embossing powder that it wasn't going to show the letters very well because they're smaller, but once I actually melted it, they all showed up perfectly. So set that aside as well. And then there's a border stamp that comes in the set. So I stamped that onto a scrap of cardstock and then just did the same thing. I super sped this up, but I just colored it in with the exact same little Crayola markers here and pulled all the color out with my water brush. So I just went along and added the color one marker at a time. got all the color added, and then watercolored all the little sticks. And then once that was done, I'm going to be able to run this through my die cut machine with the coordinating die. And I also did the same thing with the large background panel I had created. After it was completely dry, I ran that through my die cut machine with the largest of the Simon Says stitched rectangle dies. And then the sentiment here, I just trimmed with my paper trimmer. So I've got my sentiment trimmed, I've got my background die cut, and then I'm going to adhere the sentiment with just a piece of Scotch foam tape. It just happened to fit perfectly. I love when that happens. So applied that to the back of it, peeled that off, and then lined that up and adhered that to the card front here. And then for the card base itself, it's heavyweight white cardstock that I'd cut to 4 1/4 by 11, and I had scored it at 5 1/2, so it's a top folding A2 size card. And then I pulled out my Simon Says Intense Black ink, and I'm inking up yet another sentiment from that So Cool set. I'm going to stamp that onto the inside of the card, and then I can adhere this border of popsicles with my Nouveau adhesive. It's just a little thin scribble of that on the back of that, and I can pop that into place. And then for the main watercolor panel, I decided to pop that onto the card front with foam tape, just to give it a little bit of extra dimension. So got that adhered, and I was going to leave it at this, but I thought how cute this would look with some sequins. So I went through my stash and found colors that would work. So I have Pretty Pink Posh, Sea Breeze, Pretty Pink Posh. Is this raspberry? Yes, raspberry. And then I have the Simon Says stamp Sunshine Mix that had the perfect shade of yellow. So I pulled out a couple of the larger ones from that in the yellow, and then I've got a few of the different colors. And as I went to adhere these, I actually liked how they looked, adhering them over the same color of popsicle. It just, I don't know, I just like that rather than having, you know, a red on top of a yellow like I have right now. So as I was adhering them, I moved them around a little bit just to put them where I wanted them. So I'm just using dabs of that Nouveau adhesive, just picking everything up with my little crystal katana and then pressing them into place. And that finished off this card. So really quick and easy and fun. As always, if you're interested in the supplies used, anything like that, I will have them linked in the description box below the video, as well as on my blog, which is also linked directly below the video. So check that out if you're interested. Thank you all so much for watching and subscribing and thumbs upping my videos. I really appreciate it. And I will see you all very soon in the next one. Bye.